Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the board meeting of Ebbsfleet Development Corporation this afternoon. Can we just, we are recording this. It will be issued on our website later on. Hence you are watching it. It was recorded. Can we just start? Any apologies for absence?
No apologies today, but everyone's here.
All right. So gold stars for everyone. Any declarations of interest other than the standing declarations from members of the planning committee? No, they're not. Then we have our part one minutes of our meeting on the 13th of September, which are in front of us. Very thorough set of minutes as always. Is everyone happy with those, that they are true and fair record of the meeting that took place? Yes. Great, excellent. Then actions. I think there's only one outstanding action there, which is going to be coming to our board later in spring of 2024. So it looks like we're very much up to date. We've got our forward plan of meetings there. So that then brings us into our first paper of the day. Ian, your Chief Exec's part one strategic report, please.
Thank you, Simon. So a couple of matters covered in one paper this month. First one I just wanted to pause on was the quarterly performance report. So this is for the half year. You have an annex with all the detail. You see that in terms of the milestones, the corporate priorities, rated green at the moment. So consider that they are all on track. Doesn't mean they're all completed, but they're all on track to be completed by the time set. There are some highlights just set out at 2.2. Just to, I don't know, is that new homes number the most up to date, Mark? I know there was a count, and I don't know if that number
The 326 number is the most up to date.
Okay, thanks you. And on the second bullet point there, the electricity business case, I'm still focused under from later, but at the time of writing, it's sort of gone to the department. It has now been through a written procedures process for the departmental approval. We're still waiting for final confirmation that they've agreed it before it goes up to Treasury, but as of this morning, we haven't had any further queries from them, so we think that is pretty much cleared now. So it will go on to Treasury. Treasury have already seen the documentation, so we're hoping for a very speedy conclusion to that. So that's good. And on the second to last bullet point there, again probably stealing Jen's thunder, the planning application for the Northfleet Embankment East has been submitted. I don't think it's been validated yet, but it's been submitted. Shall I pause there before going on to section 3, which is the criteria, just to see whether there are any?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. Are there any comments or thoughts? See, I think some of these matters will be dealing with detail as we go through. I have
websites.
Yes, please.
So just the website's lovely. It's really good, really easy to navigate. It's great.
Fantastic work. Talking about that. More praise coming later on.
Yeah, sure.
There's an initial taste of the praise. Well done. Can I just start on the resident satisfaction survey? Is that kind of restricted to residents, having had some experience with satisfaction surveys and petitions, etc. in the past, and making sure that somehow the ability to respond into it was restricted to people within a geographical location? Is it, or could anyone say, I am a resident?
Well, Kevin, I mean, it's definitely not restricted to residents of the urban development area, so it's extended beyond that to neighbouring communities. I don't know, do we add your postcode in? So it's open to residents of all the neighbourhoods in the Garden City plus 3 wards that surround us. So Northfleet North, Portugal, Springhead, Knockhill, Greenhide, and Swanscombe. So anyone from any of those areas.
Okay, so it is restricted to people in.
Yeah, you need to put your postcode in.
Got you.
I guess someone could put a false postcode in and know that.
Yeah.
Most of the
responses we'll be getting from door-to-door interviews as well. So the company working for us will be going specifically. We've set them a target for how many responses they want from each neighbourhood and area, so we get a balanced approach across the whole area.
That's great. That sounds great. I just want to clarify that. Thank you. Any other comments on that before we move into the part 1, part 2 recommendation? No? Ian,
Okay.
You pick up.
Yeah, so this picks up section 3 for recommendation from the board effectiveness review for the board to consider the criteria that it uses for determining which parts of the agenda, part 1 or part 2, in private particular issues, matters, papers go to. So there's a bit of background there in terms of the way that's been set so far. And then there are 3.3 some criteria that we are suggesting the board adopt. Now, in respect of the last one of those, the issue to be I'm quoting, the issue to be discussed relates to enforcement action. Mark, do you want to elaborate on the nuance on that, which the board might need to reflect on, and we might need to amend that particular one?
Yeah, so at the point that the EDC as LPA is investigating an enforcement matter, it's confidential. That's quite common for every sort of planning authority in terms of, you know, who complains, who is then open to investigation. At the point that formal action is taken, that is then public, because if a notice is served, then that is then on the public register. So probably the way in which that's worded doesn't quite work for that at the moment. So it might just need to be amended slightly. I did draft some wording to read if that's helpful. The issue discussed relates to planning enforcement investigations before any formal action is taken, would be the confidential bits. At the point that if the formal action is taken, that could then be discussed in public.
Right. Yes, Neil.
Could it be before the decision to take formal action, or what's intended? Because normally, unless there's some reason for confidentiality because somebody's going to do something if they know about it, it should be taken in public, because you take planning enforcement action if it's expedient to do so, and people are entitled to know why you consider it expedient. So I think we probably need a little bit more careful. Sometimes you might take planning enforcement action, which is to serve a notice requiring somebody to provide information. That might not be done in public, but when you take a formal decision to serve an enforcement notice, seems to me that should be taken in public.
Yeah, I think that this is about what the board discuss. Because obviously the board don't decide whether enforcement action is taken either. That's obviously either delegation for my delegation or the planning committee. Obviously, if it's a planning committee, then that would then be a decision that is made in public, because that would then be discussed in public. Obviously, if we're having a conversation at board, I think probably previously when there's been public questions around enforcement cases, I've sort of said we won't be providing updates in the public section of board because it's part of a live investigation. At the point that we may have made a decision to take action, which I don't think will be taken in this meeting, the board could then discuss that afterwards. Does that help?
That does help, but it's so the decision is taken either by you or by the planning committee, and that will be done in public.
Yes. Yes. And then it could then be discussed at the board in public after the decision's taken. Shall I work on some revised wording maybe for that? Maybe we'll run that circulate that again.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Yes, Valerie.
I thought of another one, I'm afraid, which is it's not quite the right wording again, but where there is a conflict of interest, the board member, either non-exec or executive. And the reason being that very often declared conflict is managed by the individual removing themselves from the room, but you would then see it because it's being publicly recorded. In other words, that management technique.
It's the purpose of them leaving the room so they can't take part in the conversation.
Yeah. Exactly, but
they know what the decision is.
Yeah, they would still glean, they would listen to the whole part. It would, because it's a recorded piece. I don't think.
All right,
No.
you're saying,
Forgive me, that's fairly straightforward in that the purpose of somebody leaving the room is that they shall not participate or influence the debate. The debate goes ahead in public anyway with members of the public. They can then approach the member of the public afterwards and say what was said. It's really about making sure they don't influence the decision at the point it's being made. And once the decision's been made, they're perfectly entitled to know about it, aren't they?
yeah, and I could see the situation if there were commercially sensitive information that were being discussed, which they shouldn't, because they have a conflict, be aware of the commercial
Yeah.
sensitivity of it. But then de facto that should already be optional too.
Yeah.
So in a way, you raise a good point, but I think it may be covered by the fact that the confidential information will be
Yes, it's most valid when it's
imaged to anyway.
Yep.
I think that's right. And I think actually in principle, a conflicted member should not have to leave the room from a public meeting. They step away from the table, but they're as entitled as any other member of the public to attend,
Observe.
listen and observe. It's important, isn't it?
But I think there are like two flavours of that one as well. But yeah, generally they could be present for the debate but not participate. But there could be a conflict where they shouldn't be aware of the commerciality.
And that, as you say,
In which case they would have to be.
then they have to withdraw, but
Yeah.
the public wouldn't be entitled to be there
either.
either.
Where's a monitoring officer when you need one? That's what I say. To keep you out of trouble. Okay, so I think we've covered all that off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, you will address the point.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
do some more work.
Good. But generally our approach is wherever possible, we wanted in part one, subject to transparency, public scrutiny, what we're discussing and deciding. But obviously there are situations when that's not possible. Right in, board appointments.
Yeah, so if we just minute the fact that we've approved that, the board have approved that, subject to that amendment to that last bullet. Board appointments, we are still awaiting any feedback in respect of the GBC and C representative on planning committee. I think, having post writing this, we've also received a resignation from the Kent County Council representative on the planning committee. So KCC will be in the process of selecting a new nominee. So we have written again to the department to express our concern about the delay, and that particularly board have expressed a particular desire to have those representatives on the planning committee so that they could be party to the decision making around it potential. We'll continue to press with officials as much as possible. At 4.2, Neil may want to say a little more about the process that interviews took place on Monday. We did have a very good response to the advertisement. 30 applications sifted, but I don't know whether it's the outgoing.
You can say in part one. Yeah.
Yes, and Mark might wish to add something. We interviewed, was it 5 candidates on Monday? And we had a sifting process before where we had scored 30-something candidates. And we were really pleased with the level of response. Of the 5, without disclosing anything confidential, we've taken a view on the number who are appointable of the 5, which is 2. And we very much hope that one of those will be appointed. I don't think there's anything, and one in particular would exceed our criteria. And we would be really pleased to have them.
Yes, our role in this is to say if the candidates were appointable or not appointable, and then it goes to DLUC, who then make the decision with the Secretary of State. So.
All right, so the 2 appointable candidates, they've both gone up and then there'll be a decision by, oh, do we have any involvement in the
I'll just have to
discussion?
run the panel report, which is on my to-do list.
Right.
And then we'll be explaining whether people meet the criteria, exceed the criteria. And
But also, we don't send up a recommendation for appointment.
apart from appointable or not appointable, that's what
Yeah,
we do.
okay.
So,
And we can't rank.
Right. But you can say if someone exceeds the appointment criteria,
yes.
and converse of that, say if someone just meets.
Yes.
So if they're running.
Okay, so there's
That's the plan.
Which is what we are intending to do. following
through
on with
powerful
the-
analysis, you might be able to deduce. Yeah, all right, okay, all right.
But I
But we're
think,
not recommending.
but there is a urgency in these appointments because we've got a quorum of 4 on the planning committee. And at the moment, we've got 3 board members, we've got 1 independent member and 1 substitute representative of Gravesham. And so we're down to limited numbers, and the more views and voices that will be heard when we come to determine significant applications, the better.
My recommendation, Simon, would be, perhaps you to draw just a line on this.
Yeah.
Because we are getting down to.
Could someone draft something for me to go to the minister? Okay, good. Can I just ask, the KCC standing down planning committee, did they say the reasons for that?
They said that they had been, is Councillor Jordan Bede
Yeah.
public. He has been nominated for various other external appointments, and therefore hasn't got the time to do
Got you.
this job as well, and he's going to focus on those.
All right, got you. All right. All right. But there's a recommendation which has come from the leader of KCC for a new appointment.
Well, I understand that today. I mean, Derek's on at the meeting as well, and he may be able to assist. I think in the past, Kent County Council have nominated either the chair of their planning, or I don't know whether it's a planning and transport committee, or a cabinet member with that responsibility. And that is the course that the boroughs have taken when they're nominating members. And certainly from what I've learned from Mark, that has been helpful in the past, because you get somebody who's got knowledge and an overview, and has a county-wide view rather than a
Got you.
local
Got you.
borough view.
Derek, can you
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, for that. Yeah, as you say, Jordan has been given wider responsibilities as a deputy cabinet member now on a wider portfolio, and therefore sort of won't have the time to successfully and professionally devote to the planning of the Development Corporation. But I understand from my notes I've been given that Mr. Goff, leader of KCC, has nominated another senior KCC member without direct cabinet responsibilities at the moment, but with other chairmanship responsibilities, but which will enable him to devote the correct amount of time. And apparently the name has been forwarded to the board or to the Development Corporation. But I may be wrong on that, but that's what I'm being told. And the gentleman concerned, I don't know if I should name him, I probably won't at this stage, but he is local to North Kent as well,
Right.
so has a very good knowledge and a very experienced councillor as well.
right?
Many of them then. Can't be many of them then.
I must have missed the email.
Yeah. All right. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. So look, I think it in summary, if I could get a letter to pop over to the Housing Minister just to, I know they're very busy, obviously, but try and get them to focus on so we've got as successfully functioning planning committee as possible. All right, Ian, do you want to take us through how we're performing?
Well, yes, I think, as I mentioned before, everything is on the corporate plan priority milestones is graduated green, so we're on track to deliver those. In terms of the KPIs themselves, as has been pointed out in one of the public questions, we don't rank rate increase and haven't done previously, but we're happy to consider doing that. In some respects, I don't have to consider how useful that will be because these are end of year often quantums and the delivery of those, whether it's an amount of money or space, can be quite lumpy. So knowing where you are at the half year, whether you're on track or not on track, is not always easy to particularly say, just judging by the number alone. So we'll give some consideration to that. But I think on the housing numbers, probably more of this in Mark's paper, but all remember the last meeting, the numbers were not necessarily particularly high, but we didn't have returns from all of the house builders, and due to staff going out and was physically doing a count where we weren't getting returns, then the number has improved quite a bit since that. And so at the half year, we're at 326, which is more than halfway towards the 580.
Looks like we may exceed 600 that we're quite keen on.
Well, we are still hearing from all of the house builders a slowdown reservations.
Right.
So we were out seeing a couple of the house developments in Castle Hill yesterday. So it remains to be seen. I think we will be there or thereabouts. It could be above 580, and hopefully it will be.
Great. All right. So board, there's been some resets on some of our programs which are proceeding satisfactorily. So thank you very much for everyone for that. Looks like we're in good shape on all of our corporate plan and the like. But does anyone want to focus on anything in particular in this report in terms of performance in Q2? No? No? All right. Okay. So in which case, I think brings us to the end of that board. Board for decision-wise, we're asked to note paper and agree the criteria for items, papers to be considered as part 1 and part 2 of board meetings, subject to Mark just going to do that where there's enforcement matters. But is everyone happy with that? Great. Thank you very much indeed. Well done. And that brings us to General Finance and Programme and Operations report.
Thank you, Chair. Paper is at the 6-month, halfway through the financial year point. As we see in section 2, we are forecasting that we're going to spend all of our RDEL on revenue. We're going to spend about £7 million on that. 6 million allocation, utilising £1 million of receipts. In section 3, capital, we've done a sort of mid-year review. I think we can spend £8 million this financial year. So that means that 6.8 out section 3.8, we do have some headroom, and we have started the discussions with the department about requesting to get that amount reallocated into future years as part of the government-wide SUPS process, the supplementary budget process that they carry out across government-wide. So we've started that conversation with them. A little bit on health and safety. Unfortunately, still getting incidents of trespass. Section 7 updates the board on recruitment, staffing issues that have gone.
All right.
Just to say, if I may, Chair, it's fair to say the discussions on the submission are a bit. It has to be in tomorrow, so we will be making that submission and carrying forward the unspent to next year. That would be our request.
All right, good. Well, hopefully we're successful there. All right, board, are there any observations, comments on this paper? Yes, Valerie.
Just ask, such a vast discrepancy, isn't there, in the CDEL? Well, 1/3 versus 2/3 in terms of the underspend. And I just wonder how we kind of position that, because it's quite a difficult case to make with the department, isn't it? So very far behind. And it's very similar with RDEL. It's looking as if we will achieve it, but at the moment we're halfway through the year and the spend doesn't even equate to 1/3 of the total. So everything's really slipped tremendously. I don't know what the narrative around that we can share widely to
Well,
make the case, basically.
I mean, it's in terms of the profile of spend across the year, it is not untypical in organisations such as ourselves, public bodies delivering programs, that you get what is called, some places called the hockey stick effect, where the spend increases significantly towards the end of the year. So that's not unusual. We generally have displayed that characteristic, but we've managed that successfully. So on the Ardell side, and we look ahead and forecast as best we can with the information that we've got, that we're confident we will spend that allocation. I mean, the narrative really, Valerie, around the Seadale, it is largely down to the significant delay that we had in getting the allocation, therefore our ability to commit to work and spend, which I was always warning the department and informing the board that was likely to have a significant knock-on effect, because even when you get your allocation, you can't just turn the tap on straight away. Things had been on the back burner for so long. But for example, a number of the projects that we were keeping warm because of the cost inflation, they've now increased in cost, so we're having to do reappraisals, business cases, etc. So it's a knock-on effect largely of that. So that is the narrative.
All right, Valerie, hopefully that's a satisfactory answer. Simon.
I just wanted detail, which was in Appendix A, the looking at an overspend of 73,000 ICT, which sticks up on the way in terms of that particular item. Is that planning stuff that we approved at the last meeting?
It's yeah, that's a large chunk of it. It's also additional website work that we've had done.
Okay.
Yeah, basically around positive news on the planning system being available to be accessed by this kit.
Okay, and then in terms of the people side of things, some positive progress being made there, but are there any sort of key roles that we are struggling to find suitable candidates for at the moment, or are we finding that the appointments market is such that we are able to attract a good pool of people for the posts that we're seeking to fill at the moment?
It's very variable. So reported before, some roles, if we look at the last 12 months, for example, some roles have been very difficult to get candidates for, and we have, as a result of that, in those particular instances, we've looked at whether we should, just keep continuing to try and recruit to the same role, or we've taken a different course. And certainly, in the case of the asset facilities manager role, for example, which we were successful with a couple of times, we've looked at alternative ways of delivering that and adjusted accordingly. But with some roles, yes, we get a good number of candidates. So it is quite variable. And I have to say, we'll probably never quite know exactly which of those routes is going to go down until you actually go out. And we as you know, I think significantly improved our presentation of our job roles on social media and so on. We're spending more time than we perhaps were in looking across the market and benchmarking salaries and so on, in order to try to ensure we pitch in at the right place. We do take a long, hard look at the level of role that we need and try to get that right, because that can make a difference as to and so we've got, I think, a couple of roles about to go out, on a transport role and one in Jen's team as a development side. So they'll be quite good tests as well, because they're probably potentially quite challenging markets, so see.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you. Thanks, Simon. All right, so we've got a thorough update there. Is it just for noting? Is everyone happy just to note? Great, thank you very much. Jen, development update.
So just a couple of updates from me. Firstly, on Ebbsfleet Central, it's just to report that they're now in the middle of the procurement for the 6 design team roles that we're looking to get on board to support us with the phase 1 element of the project. They've all been staged over the course of a number of weeks, so they don't all fall together, but we're through some, moderated and award letters given out, and are still to receive tenders on a few more, but they will all be on board to commence work in early December, which is great, and then the design can start in earnest from there. In terms of Thames Way, at 3.2, I note how the reset and the review work that we've been doing now for a number of months has now, of course, been informally presented to yourselves in York, and the feedback that we've received from that will now feed into the conclusion of that review and the production of that strategic outline case, which we're planning to conclude in draft by the end of this year, and then it will go through governance accordingly. And likewise, the same for Grove Road at 4.2, whereby those work streams for that reset have now concluded, likewise being presented informally, and will be coming forward into a strategic outline case on a similar timetable by the end of the year. So yeah, good progress, and I think that was noted in Ian's Q2 reporting as well. And then finally, yes, just to confirm that the Northfleet Manganese planning application was submitted. It's going through validation at the moment, and we'll then, of course, work with the LPA accordingly. But also alongside that, as I noted at 5.2, we've been doing a lot of work, Paul and I, to do some independent review of the cost plans, as we suggested we would be doing, further work planned, and then further engagement with Wilmot Dixon on that as well. Again, all towards that development of that full business case. So yeah, that's everything from me.
All right, it's good progress then.
Yeah.
Any comments? No. Well, I'm pleased Northfleet Embankment East is in. Actually, when I spoke at the Kent sort of construction expo, when I was speaking to somebody, said there was a shortage of commercial floor space. There's someone who's got businesses and is in the locale there. So I was able to tell them the news that an application was going in for the Development Corporation in the near term. So well done on getting that in. So that's, any other comments on the paper? No, otherwise I think that is for noting. Thank you very much. Infrastructure and enabling update, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So just an update on the sort of key parts we're working on at the moment. So Springhead Bridge, continued discussions with KCC Director of Highways and Transportation with regards to the adoption of Springhead Bridge. We've compiled a very detailed summary report, which was sent across a couple of weeks ago, which details the historic approval process that was undertaken on the design of the bridge itself before we commenced with construction, and we're awaiting a response to that. In the meantime, all of KCC requests have been fulfilled in regards to the bridge itself, and we are in the process of arranging the principal inspection so that they can issue the certificate of construction compliance to sign off their health and safety file. So yeah, ongoing dialogue, and we're hoping to keep pushing to get them to adopt, ideally by the end of this year. That's the target we've sort of set ourselves.
Can you just remind us, just so everyone's familiar and anyone who's watching this, what's going on here? Just
yeah, so essentially
the history and what's going on and what difference it's going to make.
Yeah, so essentially we were the developer. We designed and we constructed the new Springhead Bridge. One of the agreements that was made with KCC, the local highway authority, prior to the construction was that they would adopt the bridge on its completion. We paid a considerable amount of money to facilitate the maintenance and management of that asset for KCC to manage post-construction. We delivered the bridge in accordance with the approved design. On completion, KCC raised issues with the maintenance of the lighting columns. So that is essentially the bone of contention in regards to them adopting the bridge itself. We have demonstrated that the lighting design, as well as the rest of the design, was approved by KCC, but they are remaining very reluctant to, despite all those approvals, to actually adopt the bridge itself. Hence the ongoing dialogue to try and conclude that.
Great. Can I just, do they have a contractual obligation to adopt?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
As we pointed out.
Yeah, we have indeed.
Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Happy to chase that up with Simon at KCC to see where we are on it and see if we can get some resolution.
That's great.
You want to minute that? Yeah.
That's much appreciated. We'll minute that, Derek. Thank you for your help on that.
Pleasure.
All right. But I'll just dig a little bit deeper on that one, Paul. Okay. All right. So let's move on then.
So new wastewater treatment works, with regards to the work on the new design for the relocated wastewater treatment works on the existing site, that was all halted some time ago. We're in the process at the moment, as discussed at the Board Away Day, of interrogating the costs that have been incurred to date that they have applied for. We're in the process of doing that. And we're in the process of looking for an expert, an SME, to give us advice on the odour control budget costings that they're provided to us. So that's a work in progress.
And I think just for the benefit of people who may be watching this, and it was picked up in the public questions, and in accordance with the board effectiveness review, we had kind of an off-site strategy session up in York. We had an opportunity to look around York Central, very significant regeneration site, and we discussed certain strategic issues, Blue Lake, Grove Road, and the Northfleet wastewater treatment work. So the output of that was some strategic direction to the executive. And so that's really what you mentioned there. So £2,000 hotel bill, it's money well spent of us getting together, making some decisions, basically. All right, please carry on.
Thank you. So next one, just to give a quick update on, is the electricity. So following board approval in September, as Ian sort of mentioned previously, all the papers have been submitted to DLUC, and we're waiting for ISC approval, which is kind of imminent. And we've requested understand the timeline of HMT approval beyond that. In the meantime, UKPN, our dialogue with them continues on a monthly basis, and they continue with their land purchase of the primary substation sites and the design and site assessments. So they're working well in accordance with the agreed programme.
Okay.
And just a very quick update on fast track tunnels. So we have a monthly meeting with KCC. They are still very confident that they're going to accept the 4B-SIT2 funding that they've been relating to in previous discussions, which will fund the shortfall in the fast track main tunnel, the £9 million. They have a cabinet meeting on the 15th of November. And they will formally, as we understand, accept that funding. Beyond then, they will then need to agree terms and conditions with the DFT to kind of close that process for the funding to be put in place.
All right. This one, it's interesting. I don't know, picked up with my Google alerts on various things, picked up something in the week, which was after the Labour Party conference and the Newtown announcement. And something came through against us, criticism of not delivering public transport infrastructure. There was a piece that we referenced in a piece around the Labour Newtown's announcement. So I guess that is fast track. So obviously this is a priority for us to crack on with this. Neil?
Just going to ask on that. We've got a indication of when discussions are likely to be concluded, but I suppose on the same theme, when are those tunnels, if funding is approved, likely to be delivered? And slightly different question, but when are we going to see fast track buses running through Whitecliff, Eastern Quarry? Because as I've said before, we've got this wonderful route for them, but there aren't any buses running, and it would be good to see buses running. And I'd like us to be doing everything we can to make that happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, very much a collective ambition, Neil. In terms of the tunnel itself, assuming the funding is agreed before the end of this year, KCC will need to appoint a contractor. They have submitted planning. Whether they remain on the SCAPE framework with Balfour Beatty or they re-procure, there's no indication to us of that at this moment in time. There's an 18-month build programme. So if you said feasibly 2 years from January 24, that would probably be the earliest. So January 26 would probably be the earliest that the tunnel, assuming all that funding goes through approved, would be constructed, assuming there's no delays. In terms of the fast track route through Eastern Quarry, we have monthly meetings with the Whitecliffe Working Group. We've actually got a meeting in person in here on Thursday afternoon with a view to actually thrashing out an agreement. We've had 5 meetings now, and I want us to be in a position whereby we can collectively agree. KCC have arranged for the fast track bus service to be in place from November 2024, so next year. So what we want to do with the developers on Thursday is to agree a programme whereby as much of the fast track route is constructed and available for KCC to use as of November 2024, and then thrash out the rest of the programme.
So that's good time. So November 24, we should expect to see buses running, because it seems to me it's important that when you move in as a new resident, you form habits. And if there aren't buses, you form a habit of being in a car. And as somebody who came to be interviewed as an independent member of the planning committee said when they came here, they saw an awful lot of cars parked outside houses. So this is really urgent, because it is habit forming has a real effect.
I think we're all aligned in that, Neil. 100%. This is why we've got the in-person meeting.
Right. Well, thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
I'm not entirely aligned, because I think there's a difference between car ownership and trips. And just because you're in an area with very high and good public transport doesn't mean you don't have a requirement for a car. It's about trip reduction. It's the number of journeys that you take. In this part, I mean, we get a lot of consultants from London telling us about how we shouldn't have cars, but they have a much more integrated and comprehensive public transport system than we have. And quite frankly, I'm not sure in many parts within 4 or 5 miles of here you could actually survive very easily without a car or access to taxis. And so I think I just want to put a marker. I mean, I think public transport is great. Of course I do, but I also think that actually you have to understand walking through a street and seeing lots of cars suggests to me that they're not being driven, which is the right thing. Is when there's not lots of cars, but they own lots of cars is the problem. So it's about trips, I think.
All right. Well, look, the point is very well made, Jamie. Absolutely. Paul, look, I think we're all on the same page on this.
We are.
You know, it's been referenced in a national newspaper article. I think it was the Express. Not an avid reader of the Express, but it came up on Google Alert. So I think clearly there was no attribution to the criticism there, but I think we need to crack on with this stuff. I think there's an expectation from the board that we will make progress.
It is a really important factor. I think probably the main sole reason why fast track buses are not running is because it's been designed as a through Whitecliffe, and unless that road had been driven all the way through, then there was nowhere for them to go. The sort of solution to that, recognising that it put in place, was for a couple of the developers to fund the Arriva fast and click service, which does operate. It's depending on who you talk to, when they use it, it's either criticised because of lack of availability, or you tend to use it off peak. The availability tends to be much better. So there has been a little surge of complaints about the Arriva Click service recently, which I've previously investigated it, talked to the bus companies about it, and to Arriva Click, and we're doing something similar again. As I was saying to Paul this week, it was explained to me there are only 2 buses that are paid by the developers. They made a contribution. There are 2 buses that operate. So at peak times, those 2 buses just simply can't cope with the demands that pop up. And it is a developer funded service. So it's not likely they're going to increase that level of service, but which is why we need to get this fast track services in as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
To supplement.
All right, Ian, thank you very much. We'll line on that. Let's crack on. Let's get people who we're dependent upon to do what they need to do. Okay, Paul, anything else you'd like to cover?
That's it. Thanks, Simon.
Right, great. Thanks for all the hard work. I think we're noting that. No more comments. Great. Right, thank you, Paul. That then, Kevin, public art strategy.
Yeah, so I'm covering the paper on behalf of Laura, who's now become a job share, so she doesn't work the week now.
Right.
But this is the culmination of a process we've been carrying out on behalf of the board over the last 18 months. You recall back in January 22, we had a discussion on the importance of public art in due times because of some of the proposals that we had showed in the Ebbsfleet Living report. Board asked to see what was currently happening, what the process was, and what opportunities there were. So we presented a paper to board in July 22, outlining that most of the things were going through Section 106 and through the planning system. However, there were opportunities, particularly in relation to EDC work, moving forward. So this strategy responds to that, to sort of set out a best practice guidance note effectively on opportunities for public art, what would be an appropriate process for commissioning, and it's very much a case study led document to show good practice examples from elsewhere. To say that it's not a statutory document, it's to be used primarily for EDC staff, consultants, partners, but also to be very useful for our partner developers, contractors and their partners to develop a good process that responds very much to what Ebbsfleet's context and engages with the local community in doing so. So the request really today is for board to approve us to publish this document as it stands, or we're happy to take any comment on it.
Board.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Let's have quite a meeting without Daniel on this one. Sure. Neil.
Sorry, I probably it's not too much already, but can I just ask about a curator? The idea of a curator for Ebbsfleet, which seems in general to be a good idea, and then there's a reference slightly later on to how that would be funded. Who would employ the curator? Who would they be responsible to?
Yeah, so we've looked at a number of options for that. Obviously, it would be ideal to have a consistent person being the curator, so it wouldn't really necessarily work for individual projects, other projects other than EDCs to be paying for that. So there is a suggestion of a central pot of money, and the pot of money could fund the curator. We're also employing a new member of staff to match Laura's role now, who's got some public art experience as well. So a default is we could use as an internal resource. However, our preferred approach would be to have a consistent person that we pay for through a central pot or another form of funding.
Would they be employed by the EDC?
On an ad hoc basis when they're required. In the same way as the design panel basically works, and you have a chair of the design panel, it would be a similar approach, but we'd need to figure out how we fund that.
All right. Yes, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, the worst thing you could do is design art by committee, and I don't want to do that at all. But I just want to. I think we probably have an obligation to at least think about some principles and umbrella principles on this, some helicopter principles. And one of them, it always strikes me, is the relationship or the ratio between permanent art and transient art. And when a community is paying for it, I think by and large, communities like to see curated art to have some sort of permanence, or at least mid-term permanence. Looking through this, I must admit that I thought these are some really worthy potential case studies and potential directions. But I just want to be careful, because there are an awful lot of arts organisations out there who really are just sustaining a payroll, and the quality of the art and the kind of penetration of it and the survival of it really is sometimes to be questioned. I think I'm not an artist, so I'm not going to suggest that some of the things I have concerns about aren't worthy. But I just think we need to be careful about that sort of. There needs to be a very honest approach to that strategy to saying we want to leave a legacy of art, or we want to have lots of events and happenings. And the events and happenings then, I would suggest, need to be much more rooted in public demand than in artistic temperament and desire. Because I think what you see then is a bit of a divorce. I've been in some communities and I've visited some arts projects actually where they are based around performance or particular events. And really the only people there have been other artists. And we need to be really careful to make sure we're actually penetrating into the community, that they understand it and want it and like it. The final thing is it's a real nitpicking bit. It's about one of the things it says about the Ebbsfleet Arts panel, the public arts panel. And again, you'll understand I'm very protective of the public, involvement of committees we have. It does say in there that we're going to talk to. It's going to be comprised of stakeholders, local residents, and young people. And I was just wondering what the reference to young people meant. Does that mean young people who aren't residents, or does it mean? I didn't really understand. I mean, young residents, local residents, I absolutely get it. But I again, forgive me, I'm just being the old grumpy grandpa in the room. I always get concerned when we have committees, and one of the aims is to say, well, we will involve young people. They need to be local young people. I don't think we need to. I'm sure that's what was meant. It's just odd the way they were split out like that.
Yeah, it is, because one of the main people we've consulted with or worked with to develop it was the young placemaking group that we set up through. Right. This must be the place. So we've got an established young person's placemaking group. Right. There's about 24 young people involved in that. They've been very instrumental in helping us develop this to date. So it was really acknowledgement of them, and also to ensure that we keep them or someone similar to them involved in this. So it wasn't just the typical residents you might get who turn up to lots of sort of meetings, but we did insist that we had some young people involved in the panels, whether it's that this must be the existing placemaking group or whatever its predecessor might be.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
I'm happy with that.
Before I bring Valerie, can I just ask, what are we going to see and when? The output of this. What's going to happen?
Well, we will start using this as a document to share with all of our partners to try to influence what's coming through the Section 106 and planning system.
Okay.
And we'll also then start to try and embed this in our own work. So we're developing our own projects, making sure public art and this process is integral to our thinking about how that moves forward.
So do we have any unallocated 106 at the moment that should be going to public art?
There's requirements for Eastern Quarry to be putting in more public art in other locations. So it isn't financial amounts, it's to deliver on site.
Okay, so they're specified sites where there should be a piece of public art.
Yeah, opportunity areas. There's a strategy that covers Eastern Quarry that identifies opportunities where they then.
And so that obligation falls to various house builders who are active on plots at the moment.
Yeah, without going through what falls to where. It's a Henry Capnat thing that gets delivered. The obligation arguably sits with all the landowners collectively, but it's delivered through the master function.
But it's funded by
Capnat.
It's funded by Camland or the developers.
Capnat.
Henry Camland is the master.
Okay, all right, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I mean, one of the key opportunities that is identified in the strategy is art in the parks and art in the everyday. So it's almost the parks are one of the things that we haven't developed too far yet. So it's a real opportunity for us to really embed some of this thinking into the parks. Define who are working on the major urban park have already been working very much with this young placemaking group and helping them design the park. And they've engaged with the community board and other people. So we can see opportunities, particularly in the parks, to do something relatively quickly.
Can I just ask one more question, Valerie? Do we have enough EDC resource against this to make something happen?
In terms of the public art itself.
Well, whatever's going on to activate this strategy. Yeah,
we do. And as Kevin said in response to Neil's question about, there is a question of the curator role and how that's funded, which probably need to do a little bit more on, but we'd like to have a positive line that's collected from the different developments. We would contribute that. We are a developer in our own right, of course, will be. So that's probably something that we've just got to get a final solution.
And the new person starting in our team as an artist coming from Arts Council.
and they've got a basically public art background as well. So
Okay.
I'll probably use her to kind of manage the process.
What's her role more in your team?
So she's going to be a job share to the cultural development manager. So it's going to be 2 people job sharing that role moving forward.
Okay.
It gives us more resource overall.
All right. Okay. The thrust of my question was really how we get something done.
Yeah.
Right. It sounds like. Yeah. Okay. Good. Alan.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, in principle, I support this 100%. Who wouldn't? You know, it's a great opportunity, I think. But I was kind of struggling with what it might actually mean in practice, I suppose, because the priority themes are generic and very broad-based. I think I understand them, you know, health and well-being and encourage people more active, sustainability, supply chains and so on, and then playfulness, bringing joy to people's lives. But they're terribly subjective. Somehow we would need to be much more precise, having done engagement work and all the rest of it with the local communities, in terms of the actual commission, because I think there is a trend at the moment where the joy, in fact, is from the artist, and they use the public arts, for example, to make a political statement, whether it's about homelessness or whatever. And that doesn't necessarily bring joy to those that have to live with it, you know? So somehow we need a way of ensuring that when we're doing the actual commissioning, it does genuinely reflect the 3 themes, but most importantly, what would really enrich the lives of those that will see it every day. They won't be joyful.
I think that's where the particular connection came from, art in the parks and involving young people to try and be creative, perhaps in even the landscape. It might be something.
Absolutely. We kind of want to shy away from, you know, political statements and like, do you know what I mean? It's,
I think that's where the playfulness came from, was really thinking about the landscape and opportunities and getting young people involved.
Yes.
But isn't it as well about the commissioning process? So, and
I think it must be.
the community in that, and directing that, and
yes,
not directing the process, but what they want to see, what will make them joyful, as opposed to the artist saying, this makes me joyful, this is what I'm going to do for you.
Because things get lost in translation.
All right. Yes.
So again, I echo most of the things that Valerie was saying, and including the 100% point. But the having spent a lot of time on public art in major schemes, it's quite interesting. You have to look at a lot of sorry, the phrase I'm looking for is you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you get a nice piece of art. It's a very odd metaphor, I think. But,
it's a polite way of how others might have described the process. Yeah,
I'm sure it'll be on a YouTube highlight shortly. But and to go to sculpture parks and those who support public art and to actually see the opportunities for public art is a truly great thing. So there was a great sculpture park at Goodwood where we chose quite a few pieces. But actually, I think the essence of what we need to be thinking of is, what is the theme that we are going for, rather than spending time on commissioning individual art for particular locations. Because I think we have an opportunity with Ebbsfleet Garden City to have an overall theme that everyone fundamentally buys into. And going back into the early 60s, possibly late 50s, if you think about Harlow, and that came forward, the whole populace all going into the new town took enormous amount of pride in the art strategy that was being very carefully curated by the master planning architect and the various artists that he brought together, and not to have a sort of coordinated theme, whether it's just for Ebbsfleet Central or for the Garden City generally, I think would be an error. And also, if we have a thematic approach, make the curation of choice is a lot easier, and the consultation process and the overall buy-in. And then as I bought public art, be so careful that it's not capable of being vandalised, stolen. Funnily enough, everything in Harlow has been nicked, virtually every single piece. And we need, well, I had a marvellous piece at the start of Wembley, and we had to take it away after a week because people were skateboarding through it. It had never occurred to us that we actually had to think about some of these thought processes. And so that whole thought process about the robust nature of the art and how defensible it is, well, again, is an issue because we can't control. So
I really want a bit of public art that you could get people to skateboard.
So I-
That seemed to be
well,
really
Is that
Sorry, just to respond to that, we did sort of consider that overarching theme. We've ended up with 3 themes, which kind of come from that idea of it being young and playful and new, being our healthy new town, and also that concept of being sustainable. So that's something that probably places haven't thought of in the past. And there is always that potential tension. So ECPA's lecture, funny enough, last annual lecture this year was on public art in new towns, which I went to last week. And there is actually a conflict of opinion. You know, so if you go to Peter Lee's famous Apollo, which is now a grade 2 star, it's hated locally, and people feel it's kind of imposed on them, as opposed to people in Harlow maybe really being quite proud of their sculpture town. So there is an interesting tension between the commissioned thing that's landed in some of the new towns previously versus the one that appeared. For example, Milton Keynes cows are actually loved locally because it wasn't just the cows, it was the fact that it was an artist in the community who worked with people who developed the concept, and that's why it does have a longevity. So we're really, really conscious of not, it probably is going to be a balance of things being commissioned and things growing from public, but we are keen that it doesn't just be random, and there is those 3 themes that we kind of keep out. There could have been other themes, but we kind of felt you had to have something to make it consistent, otherwise you'd have lots of different opinions coming from everywhere and everyone could kind of steer it around to their own opinion.
Right. Thank you very much. Simon, yes, 2 very quick points. On page 36, it does talk about the ongoing management of these units. I think that's essential to get built in right in terms of agreements with Manco and the Garden City Trust in terms of how these are going to be maintained and managed going forward. And I think that should be, if anything, right at the beginning, rather than an afterthought or picked up later on as to how to do that. And the second suggestion would be that I would very much like to see this as an art trail. You know, we have sculpture trails, we have art trails in other places, and I think if we're going to have a curator, then part of what they could and should do is to make sure that there is a narrative that allows people to follow an art trail around the Garden City that perhaps picks up some of the things as well as to how people can navigate and engage with the art in the city as we create it.
Yes, great. Yes, that the narrative is hugely important, and you'll be ahead of us on this. But you know, QR codes where you can work out what the thing is about, you can put it in context, you can see the story. Many people will just pass it by, but actually that creates a depth of response, which nerds like me find interesting.
Good. All right.
So let's move on. I'm mentioning one thing, just in terms of the public presentation of this. It took me a little while to understand the tomorrow issue, and I found the reference to it with the original Ebenezer Howard. I just think we need to think about that in terms of our presentation to the public, because it looks like we've kind of done what we're talking about really. There needs to be, I think, a closer reference to that whenever we use it. I mean, if we can just sort of explain that these were the words of Ebenezer when he started this work, you know, otherwise it looks like we made a spelling mistake or made a sort of printing error on it. But so I think that's
in the paper. Is there kind of an attribution?
Yeah, it comes from Ebenezer Howard right at the beginning. But it's about when we actually, but that will get lost in individual leaflets, I think. And I think perhaps there ought to be a little Ebenezer Howard quote on the end, so it's almost as part of the branding, really. You know, we don't get sight of that as we go on.
There's a big heading on page 8.
Yes, it's all there, it's explained, but it's basically, if you put a leaflet out that says that tomorrow, it'll look like, well, what's that dash doing in it? So I think we need to, and secondly, quickly, in terms of interaction, the Rolling Stone statues that have got up at Dartford High Street, someone phoned me in high dudgeon to say, oh, they're being abused and misused, and they showed me a photograph, and it turned out that people are attaching their dogs to them when they go into restaurants, and I just thought that was hilarious. It's hilarious. It's exactly what you should be doing. I mean, it's just very, very funny. And I don't do anything wrong. I mean, they're not doing any harm to it. It's just they've almost adopted it now as being so familiar after just a couple of months that they're prepared to do that and trust their dogs to them. So I think that's really cool. And I think we shouldn't worry about interaction, really, and this is damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, look, had a good discussion around that. Lots to happen. On this, it's an important area for residents, so thank you. I think there is a decision to approve the publication of the looking forward tomorrow, a new public art strategy for Ebbsfleet. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Yeah,
great, thank you. Then that's the end of part 1 meeting. We have some public questions which those will be answered. Thank you very much for joining us.